So we're going to go to Steve Gillon, who's a resident historian at the History Channel, University of Oklahoma history professor. Steve, I don't know where you are, but I gather it's not Iowa.
No, it's someplace a little warmer. I'm in Miami Beach.
That was a very smart move on your part. Look, when you look at this from the standpoint of history, there are any number of things that I find unprecedented about this campaign for the Republican nomination, one of which was the remarkable role that the debates, public debates, played in the course of the last few months.
That's right. I mean, they have, but what's interesting is that the consensus has been that Gingrich has been the person who's won all the debates, but hasn't gotten very far, judging from the results tonight. Debates have attracted a lot of attention, and I think, and there's been more of them this year, so I think it's probably a feature we're going to see in the future campaigns.
A lot of times the reason you don't see these debates is because the front runner says, I'm not going to play. It's not in my interest to expose myself, and if the front runner doesn't play, the debates lose their interest. Mitt Romney didn't do that. Why didn't he do it?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think that Romney knew he was in a tough contest, and he's had difficulty trying to gain traction with conservative voters, and he needed to get out there, and he's a fairly good debater, and I think he knew that he would do well standing shoulder to shoulder with the other candidates, and he did.
Yeah. Another thing we've seen in the last couple of weeks that is unprecedented in my experience is a candidate taking the high road with his own message and his campaign's messages, but his supporters, this super PAC, spending millions of dollars launching negative attacks on Newt Gingrich without Romney having to feel the effects of the blowback that you would normally get if you did something like that.
Yeah, well, I think the problem there, and that obviously is a consequence of the recent Supreme Court decision. I think you're going to see that playing out a lot in the rest of the primaries and campaign. But I think the problem there with Gingrich is he simply didn't have the money to respond. I think Gingrich, in knowing Newt Gingrich, definitely wanted to respond. He just did not have the money to do so.
Yeah. Steve, I'm going to ask you the same question I've asked everyone else we've been talking to tonight. Do you see any chance that any substantial chance that anyone other than Mitt Romney can end up with the nomination?
You know, I'm not as confident about. I think, listen, what Iowa normally does is it gives a candidate momentum.
Yeah.
And to some extent, there are three candidates who are coming out of the Iowa caucus with momentum. Romney is the only one who also has the money and the message. So when it comes to those three essential ingredients in a successful campaign, Romney is the only one who has all three, but he certainly has some obstacles. And he is at that threshold, that 25-30% threshold, that he can't seem to get over. And I think this is clearly who's going to win in New Hampshire. And I think this contest, like past contests, it's going to go to South Carolina and Florida. And the question will be is whether the conservative vote in the Republican Party is going to coalesce around one candidate, an anti-Romney candidate, or whether it's going to splinter, or whether Romney can win some of them over. So I do believe that this contest will probably come to an end in South Carolina or Florida. I don't think that there is quite the clarity. Normally, New Hampshire weeds out candidates. It doesn't pick winners, but it eliminates candidates. And I think the only thing you can say for sure after tonight is that Michelle Bachmann's campaign is dead. Newt Gingrich and Rick Perry on life support. But there's still a pretty wide open field, and I think you're going to skip over New Hampshire, and I think South Carolina and Florida are really going to be decisive, and it's going to determine whether or not Mitt Romney can build some support among conservatives, or whether a anti-Romney candidate, Rick Santorum or someone else, is going to emerge as a viable alternative. Well,
maybe you just answered my question, but who of this rostrum of candidates do you think has a shot of doing that in South Carolina and Florida? Santorum?
No. I think Santorum. You know, with Santorum now, as you know, he's going to go through the vetting process now. Since he's always been a fringe candidate, he's never gone through that intense national vetting process that a legitimate, viable presidential candidate goes through. So that's going to begin now, and I think we're going to sort of term is going to be defined by the media over the next couple of weeks, and we'll see if he can withstand that scrutiny. I don't think he clearly has a clear message. He certainly doesn't have an organization or the money. I think Gingrich brings a lot of baggage. Ron Paul is clearly not a viable national candidate. So I think, Romney wins by default, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily the way you want to win a nomination.